going on, everybody? James Hancock here, back to review episode 5 of season 3 of The Expanse, an episode called Triple Point. Now, running this channel, sometimes these videos can feel like work, but tonight's review is going to be an absolute pleasure and a privilege to record because this was easily one of the strongest episodes in any of the 3 seasons of The Expanse. And it was a very firm reminder of just how gripping and exciting and suspenseful and imaginative this show can be when it's firing on all cylinders. If you've been following my channel for a while, you know that sometimes I am inclined to call out The Expanse when they give us an episode that feels like filler in between the really juicy bits in the books. But this episode was totally hardcore, and it had at least like 4 or 5 like high five moments to speak of. But before I get to my recap and review, I just want to say thank you to the people who left comments on my video last week. They helped remind me of some crucial details about the Nauvoo that I've forgotten. So once again, thank you for all the input. I greatly appreciate it. But also as a gesture of goodwill to the Martian characters of the show and their very cool-headed conduct that we saw in tonight's episode, I'm rocking out my MCRN t-shirt as a gesture of solidarity with our Martian brethren. Also tonight, in addition to the really cool episode, I saw a lot of trailers and featurettes for this new show, Night Flyers, that's coming out on Syfy in the fall. I don't know if any of y'all out there have read George R.R. Martin's original novella. I think it's from like 1980, or maybe it was collected in a volume of short stories a couple years later. At any rate, I have read George R.R. Martin's Song of Ice and Fire books, or at least the 5 that have been published so far. But it's a show I'm definitely planning on following in the fall, and I'll definitely be reading the source material before the show is released. But if anyone has any information on that particular show or source material, definitely let me know. In any case, enough rambling on my part, let's talk about tonight's episode. One of my most consistent criticisms of this show from day one has always been that the scenes on Earth feel limp in comparison to the scenes that take place with our central characters out in space. And about 3/4 of the way through this episode, I realized, wait a second, there are no scenes on Earth this episode. No wonder I'm having so much fun. And maybe that sounds unnecessarily snarky. I just think the writing and the characters are better when we're aboard the Rocinante. But what I loved about this episode is that you really felt like the showrunners were putting their foot down on the gas pedal. I no longer believe that they'll stretch out the events of the book Caliban's War until the end of the season. Very clearly, they're planning on wrapping up that book in the next episode or 2. As one commenter noted on last week's video, if you look at the names of the upcoming episodes, if you have read the second book, it gives you a pretty clear indication of the sequence of events that they're going to be following. But much to my surprise, some of the most gripping scenes this entire episode feature characters that are not the superstars aboard the Rocinante. We get a really tense, exciting mutiny aboard the Agatha King. Now, I love movies like The Kane Mutiny starring Humphrey Bogart, or more recent movies like Crimson Tide with Gene Hackman and Denzel Washington. There's something about being in a tight, confined ship, whether it's in space or deep underwater, where when the shit goes down, riveting drama ensues. But we see that the Martians from the previous episode, they successfully relay Christian's message to their own commanding officer. She's initially skeptical, but they manage to get that information across to the Agatha King anyway, and it finally reaches Southern. And Southern's very reluctant to mount a coup or a mutiny of any kind, until it becomes very clear that Wynn, beyond a shadow of a doubt, is absolutely acting as part of a larger conspiracy. And I love just looking at the conflicting emotions on the faces of the various crew members as they're trying to figure out who they should support between Southern and Wynn. But while that's all unfolding, we do get some nice little moments aboard the Rossi. We see that Alex receives a message from his son, and his son still loves him and misses him and really wants to see him again. We see that Amos is giving Prax some shooting lessons, and I've really enjoyed seeing how Amos and Prax have almost become like a little buddy cop movie in the middle of this larger drama. And we see how Prax is actually getting kind of hardcore. While he's working on his target practice, he acknowledges that whether May survives or not, he is hell-bent upon getting some revenge. So it's almost like Prax has become Amos's pupil, and I just love how Prax is a botanist. He's a scientist. But he's definitely starting to shift gears into Charles Bronson mode. This was also the first episode where I really felt as if Bobby is a member of the crew of the Rocinante. She's hanging out with Alex. She's talking about the techniques they used to kill the hybrid in the previous season. While some of the fuel and gear that she needs for a suit is absent aboard the Rocinante, she does find some nice incendiary ammo, so she knows if she gets in close enough, she'll be able to nuke that sucker down. And we get a scene that basically borders on reconciliation between Naomi and Holden, where she admits that she had a former lover, she had a son with that lover. And while Holden says he'll never fully forgive her for betraying the crew, but the flip side of that is that he will never criticize her or hold it against her for doing what she believes to be right. And for people like me who are absolutely fascinated by the Proto-molecule, this episode had some really juicy stuff. The Proto-molecule is one of those plot elements that just gives this show a little something extra that most sci-fi shows are lacking. It's unpredictable, it's mysterious, it's highly combustible, it's highly contagious, it's very dangerous. I'm absolutely fascinated by everything to do with it, but we get this really interesting scene scene where this kid has almost gone full hybrid, and he keeps ranting and raving about how the proto-molecule is not only gathering materials, that is repurposing them, that is trying to build something. Of course, Joe-Pierre Mao is like, oh, what is it? What is it? He keeps asking him questions. He's unable to get the answers that he wants. And when Katoa basically completely freaks out and is going to be unable to speak anymore, Joe-Pierre Mao, son of a bitch that he is, he gives the green light to experimenting on May. Now, we don't see them experiment on May, but we do see her getting strapped down, and my heart went out to this poor little girl. Whether or not they actually inject her or not, we don't know, but Joe-Pierre Mao at this point is all in and trying to figure out what the proto-molecule's larger goal is. If you've read the books, you 100% already know, but even if you know what the proto-molecule's up to, it's still fascinating to watch in action. So the Rocinante finally does arrive at Io, but they get stuck at the front door basically. They basically needed R2-D2 to open it, but they spend the rest of the episode just trying to get the front door open. Meanwhile, aboard the Agatha King, all hell's breaking loose. Shots are being fired. People are getting taken out. Southern gets shot. Wynn gets wounded. Wynn at one point sees a wounded soldier on the ground and just starts shooting her in the back because she was one of the mutineers. I mean, it is a down and dirty shootout aboard the ship. But it's actually a really emotionally stirring and inspiring scene because at one point Southern does successfully manage to take over the ship briefly, and it looks as if cooler heads are going to prevail, that he's going to dispel this conspiracy and that Mars is going to stand down. But what's interesting is that Mars basically decides to hang back because a full-blown civil war breaks out between the Earth ships. Wynn starts firing on his own side. They start firing back. And Wynn, out of desperation, realizing the situation that he's in, he launches a secret weapon which could have devastating consequences for the entire solar system because he launches all the hybrids that have been kept in reserve at Io. We see them basically get launched like torpedoes up into space. And as we know, wherever those hybrids land, not only will they wreak havoc and kill everything in sight, but they will also spread the proto-molecules. So whether it's Earth or Mars or a ship or wherever they hit, kiss those targets bye-bye. It was a really cool way to bring the episode to a close. It's the ideal cliffhanger. But as we saw brief flashes of in the teaser, and for people who have read Caliban's War, the best is yet to come. You ain't seen nothing yet. It's going to get insanely intense before things calm down again. So as you can tell from the smile on my face, I absolutely love this episode. It was definitely the best episode of the season so far. I'll put it in the top 5 Expanse episodes, period. Very fired up to see what comes in next week's episode, which is called Immolation, which I feel like is a nice tease in itself. But as always, I love shooting the shit about the show with my fellow fanatics. If there's anything I missed or overlooked, definitely let me know. Best place to reach me is always on Twitter at Corbrex, but you can also leave a comment in the comments below. And give my channel a subscribe if you want more recaps and reviews of a similar nature in the future. But thank you so much for watching my channel. I really appreciate it. Onwards and upwards.